Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1121B, and today's date is November 7th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Everything is Now in Place for the Deep State to Manipulate the Election. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we talk a lot about Obamacare, and people are starting to really wake up and realize that Obamacare, it is not a benefit to the people whatsoever. And what we're seeing is that the people who've joined up to Obamacare, well, they're starting to revolt. And they're saying that, listen, we don't have this kind of money to spend. And most of the people, they are shying away from going to the doctor now. And we can see this is not a good thing because those people who need care, they need to visit the doctor. For example, Michelle Harris is 61 years old, retired waitress in Northwest Montana, has arthritis in both shoulders, but is doing everything she can to avoid seeing the doctor because she has a $4,500 deductible and a $338 a month payment under her Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. And what that means is she has to pay $338 every single month, and if she goes to the doctor, she still has to lay out the cash first to meet the deductible of $4,500. So if she goes to the doctor and the doctor bill is $250, she has to pay $250. The insurance kicks in absolutely nothing. If she goes to the doctor again and it's another $250, she has to keep paying out $250 until she reaches $4,500 within that year, while paying the $338 a month for her. And a lot of people are starting to realize that this is not really helping me. This is very expensive. And people are starting to revolt and say, you know something? I don't think we should have Obamacare anymore. And especially those people who are paying penalties now are saying, why am I being penalized for something that I decide I don't want? And the government should have no right to force you into doing something you don't want to do. Well, we see the United States right now where everyone believes that the United States is not corrupt, for those people who aren't paying attention. But when we look closely, we know the United States, the politicians, they're all corrupt. All right, I'll say 99.999% of them are corrupt. And we can see right now that the United States has dropped in its rankings from 142 to 158 for the most corrupt country in 2016 for global transparency. And we can see right now that the United States continually drops in its rankings. So when people say, oh, we have the transparent government, we are not corrupt, it is simply not true. We see out in the UK, people are very angry. We see that the powers that be, the central banks, they're trying to stop the trigger of Article 50. Now, we can see that Elizabeth May is going to push hard to try to trigger Article 50, but we see right now that because of the court ruling, they have to go through Parliament, and Parliament has to vote. So right now, the central banks, they are doing whatever they possibly can to stop this. Remember, this was only an advisory referendum that they had out in the UK. This is the will of the people. But central banks don't follow the will of the people. They follow in what they want. And they want all these countries to be slaves to the central bank. And I would be shocked if they're able to trigger Article 50. Because the central bank will do whatever they possibly can to stop this. And if they do stop this, the people are going to feel like they were cheated. They're going to feel like they're betrayed. And you're going to see angry individuals. And you might even see rioting, a civil war. And the government is going to have problems. This is what happens when you go and you force people into a corner. People get angry, pissed off, and they realize, well, wait a minute, you're not working for the people anymore. And we see this here in the United States. This is why people are angry today. because they see what the establishment has done. Those people have woken up. Those people who are out there looking at what is happening, they realize we can't go on like this. Now, there are many people that are still asleep. They believe that everything is fine. Well, they're going to find out that it isn't. I mean, this is completely evident with the USA Freedom Act. Now, remember when the NSA got caught spying on the people? Of course, they lied to the people, but no one had a problem with that. Well, except for myself, all of you listening, and many on the alternative media. But the corporate media really didn't have a problem with that. But they lied to the American people that they were spying and violating the Fourth Amendment. And no one really had a problem with this. So the president came out and said, listen, we're going to have major reforms to calm the situation down. And what did they do? Well, they came up with the USA Freedom Act, where they decided, listen, we won't spy on the people. We'll let the corporations spy on the people, and we'll get the information. Well, since that time period, back in June of 2015, when it became law, guess what? Unwarranted surveillance has not decreased. It's increased. Actually, it's a lot worse today than it was before the USA Freedom Act. So all they did was transfer the spying to companies like AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, and they use a secret FISA court to get the information. And this court allows them to say, yes, you can. Now they're going to say, yes, we do get the information, but we don't look at the American side of the conversations. We only look at the foreign sides. We don't look at the metadata. They make up all these excuses. And really what's coming out of all of this is that the spying has increased on the American people, because we know they're listening to it. We know they're looking at it. We know the metadata gives them a lot of information. And all they did was transfer who is spying on the people, because they realized it's a lot easier for the companies to give us the information than the government to access their network to get the information. AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, they already have it built in. They already written software for this. And we can see right now, this, again, is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So whenever they tell us that, this is for the best interest of the people, no, it's the best interest for them, the authorities. And they use fancy terms on their bills, as we know. It's always the opposite. USA Freedom Act has nothing to do with freedom. The Patriot Act has nothing to do with patriotism. Affordable Care Act has nothing to do with affordability. These are all terms they use to create the perception that they are working for the people, when in fact they're doing the exact opposite. Now, at this point, we all realize that the United States government central bankers, they are ready and prepared for war. They're not going to back down. They're not going to stop. They realize the economy is failing. It's deteriorating very, very quickly. We're moving towards the end game here. And we can see already that with all the movement of military assets, troops around the world, they are now prepared to push this war forward. We see that NATO right now, they're putting 300,000 troops on high alert, of course, amid fears of some type of confrontation with Russia. And we see right now that everything is going on high alert. And the reason why they're doing this is they're preparing and getting ready for what is coming. Out in the Middle East, what are we seeing? Well, the situation is getting worse for the United States government central bankers. And what they're trying to do is create a space in the Middle East where they can break off portions of Iraq and Syria and create a brand new country. And this is what they've been doing. Out in Mosul, they have dropped one bomb every 8 minutes during the first 3 days of the Mosul offensive. That is a lot of bombs. And they completely obliterated the entire area. And Russia is looking at the situation and they're calling it a medieval slaughter. That the destruction is horrific. And they're calling on human rights watchers to go into this area to see what has been done. Remember, they're really not fighting the Islamic State. What they're doing there is they're keeping those individuals who are trying to push out the puppet regime, who want the power back, who want their country back, who want the United States government central bankers out. What the United States is trying to do, and Turkey, is they're trying to separate these regions to create a separate country. And this is what they're trying to do in Syria, because they want to join these regions and call it a Kurdish region. Remember, their plan has always been to separate these countries into Kurdish, Shia, Sunni, Alawite areas. Now, out in Syria, the United States government central bankers are out there saying that Russia's humanitarian aid, well, it's futile. It has done absolutely nothing. And they use the humanitarian corridors, they use the ceasefire to their advantage. And Russia came back with, well, wait a minute. We've delivered 100 tons of essential goods, foods, medicine, other basic necessities to Aleppo. How much has the United States delivered to the Syrian people? And the answer is zero. They delivered weapons for the Islamic State, for Al-Qaeda. They delivered goods to their terrorist groups. But to the people that they care so much about, that they're fighting for, nothing. Especially in Aleppo. And we can see right now that the United States government central bankers, they realize that Russia is winning the propaganda war in certain areas. Maybe not here in the United States, because they really don't speak about it at all. But when you really look at the situation in Syria, you can see Syria and Russia, they have the upper hand. And Russia right now is saying, listen, we will have a ceasefire in Aleppo unless the terrorist groups attack. And if they do attack, the ceasefire is over. And what always happens is the terrorists will attack. They don't want a ceasefire. It's not going to benefit them. They are pushing and trying to get Russia and Syria out of Aleppo. This is why they brought in a lot more Islamic State soldiers. This is why they've been making an offensive in Aleppo, but it has not been working. So Turkey and the U.S., they have agreed on a long-term plan to capture and govern Raqqa. As we can see already, the offensive has started, and they're planning to seize and hold this entire area. They're going to be calling it the capital for the moderate rebels, because what they're trying to do is they're going to break it off, and they're going to say to Russia, they're going to say to Syria, this is the Kurdish land. Let's talk about peace. This is the capital. These are our leaders. And this is the card the United States government central bankers are going to play at this point. Now, of course, Assad, Russia, they have already said this is not going to fly, but we will see what happens, because at this point, Russia might talk to the United States to avoid war. Because as we can see from the actions of Russia, if they really wanted a war, and this was all about going to war, and they were all part of the war effort, they could have had war at any time. I mean, think about when Turkey shot down the Russian plane. We could have had World War III right there. They didn't have to wait. Actually, if we go back to 2013, when the United States brought in the aircraft carriers, the submarines, and they were ready to go into Syria with the sarin gas, they could have just let the United States come in. Russia would have said, okay, World War III has started, let's do it. But they haven't. They could have done it in Ukraine. But again, it's not because the United States has pulled back. It's because Russia, through their actions, not the words of the propagandists here in the United States, through actions, they have avoided war each time. But it's getting harder and harder to do, because when someone is pushing for war, they will do whatever they have to get war started. And if they can't get the other side to start a war, they'll do it for them. I mean, look what's happening now with the elections. The United States has used the propaganda that Russia has cyber attacked the DNC and the election system. And we know this is fake, phony, and false. We know that there's no way that they tracked it back to Russia in the couple of days that they announced it. First of all, it would take a very long time for them to try to track this down. I mean, think about it. We just had a cyber attack in the northeastern area where we had a denial of service attack, which brought down a lot of domain service. Now, the United States government, so far, have they announced who has done it? They have no clue, because they bounce it off of servers. They take control of computer systems, servers, other devices that are connected to the internet to do what they need to be done. And right now, the United States just coming off and saying that, hey, we know it was Russia, we know it was North Korea, we know it was China. That's how you know it's a lie. There is absolutely no way, especially with an advanced state actor, no way. And what we're seeing right now is everything that they're doing, they are using for a specific reason. When they say Russia has attacked the DNC and the election system, they needed that information out there. They need to bring Russia into the war. Remember, they want a war, and if they can't get a country to do something, they will do it for them to convince the American people that, yes, this is why we're going to war. So everything that has been done right now is on purpose. Now think about this for a second. We have this election psyop going. They want their candidate, Hillary. She's part of the establishment. They want her in power. They know they have to manipulate the elections. And we see that WikiLeaks, they were releasing a lot of emails. A lot of emails were coming out implicating Hillary, the Clinton Foundation, and we can see that most likely there was a crime committed there, maybe even treason. But the FBI decided, okay, listen, we'll reopen the case. We'll look at these new emails. Now remember, everything they're doing is to create this narrative of why you need to vote for their person. Just like they've been using the economy. Think about this for a second. All of a sudden the stock market is up 300 points. The unemployment came down to 4.9%. The GDP surged to 2.9%. Remember, everyone only remembers the last message. The FBI, a day or two before the elections, came out and said there is nothing to see here. Now, the FBI, Comey, he's not a good guy. He's not working for the people. He's working for the establishment. He's working for the shadow government, the deep state, the central bankers, the elite, the globalists, whatever you like to call them. All these agencies, they are working for them. All of this was done on purpose. And I know a lot of people are thinking like, ooh, she's going to get indicted. And no, what they did on purpose was to say, we're looking at this. And then they say there's no evidence of criminal behavior, criminality, and there's nothing here. Right before the election. So people hear that and say, all this stuff that was put out there, it's meaningless. They played the American people. And now people are going to think that, okay, there's nothing. They played the manipulation game. This is part of the manipulation game, not just manipulating the election results, but manipulating what people perceive. And this is exactly what they did. This is part of the psyop. And they did it on purpose. Because what I'm seeing right now is they have everything in place to get their candidate into power. Now, the only thing that might stop their candidate getting into power is if there is a landslide of the popular vote, where the manipulation they have in place for the election manipulation it just can't handle it, because if there's millions of people going towards Trump, and I know there's the Electoral College, but we can see already that the Electoral College is already taken care of. The problem is when the manipulation of, the popular vote is way out of whack, and I'm talking way out of whack of 500,000, 1 million people. This is where they're going to run into the problem. This is where the problem comes in, because they can manipulate, but only so far. This is why they put into place those other plans. And it's part of the psyop of the election, where they will have some type of cyber attack. They will use it if they have to. And this is why we have to wait for the elections. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying they will use it if they need it at that time. If they see this occurring, the elections will be stopped because of this. They'll say it's temporary. They'll tell those people who already voted, don't worry, your votes are there. Those people who haven't voted, don't worry, you will be able to vote later on. Or they'll say it's a complete redo, which I think they might do, because then they can reprogram the systems to handle what just happened. And this way they can say, well, those other results were because of the hack, and these new poll results that we're getting now, these are the clean ones. That's why it's very close. They want the election to be very close, to make people feel like the system actually worked. To make it feel like, yes, this is fair. This is all part of the psyop. So we can see that this election right now, they have everything in place. They have the economy showing that it's doing fantastic. The stock market is up very high day before the elections. Comey just cleared Clinton. Even if she's guilty, it doesn't really matter, because they're going on perception, the last thing that people hear. And we can see already that with all the early ballots coming in, they manipulated the systems, which is done from the inside. And they already have plans if this doesn't go the way they thought it was going to go, and they can postpone the elections. Now, something very interesting was emailed to me. I'm not going to mention the person's name. This is from the Federal Reserve Building in Boston. And they issued a message on Friday where this message is stating that the law enforcement unit, the bank's law enforcement unit, will host department-wide training designed to enhance the law enforcement unit operational knowledge and capabilities during crisis. It'll be a full-day training. It will include briefings from local and national law enforcement officials on a number of key issues. And we can see right now that those people who must come to the building must follow the LEU's post signage and instructions. And we see right now they're going to be simulating weapons during the training activities. They're going to be doing certain things in this area. And the person who emailed me said that they've never seen this before. This is the first of its kind. And what this tells me is that the central banks, the government, as we know, they are preparing for some type of major crisis, which I believe will happen. Because think about what's happening right now. We have the elections coming up. A lot of people think it's manipulated, which it is, from all the proof that we've had with fractional magic, from pre-programming the system, from the psyop that they've been using. We understand the economy is deteriorating and collapsing very quickly. We understand the United States government central bankers are trying to bring us to war as fast as they possibly can. And we can see all of this is happening all at once. And we know that people are going to be very angry. People are going to be pissed off. People are going to say, you know something? This government is not working for the people. The elections were manipulated. And the government, the central banks, they are prepared to handle this type of reaction. And this is why we have to remain peaceful. This is why the people have to come together. Put our differences aside. And I know people are for different candidates, but the outcome is going to be the same. The shadow government, the deep state, they are going to bring us to war. And it doesn't really matter if you're Republican or Democrat, because they're going to tell everyone through the draft, because there's a draft bill pending in Congress, that you need to go to war. And it's not just men today. It's women and men who will be drafted into war to go to the front lines to fight for these central banks, for the shadow government, for the deep state, why they stay behind. And we can see right now, we all need to put our differences aside, and we need to step up, not just here in the US, in Canada, Europe, UK, everywhere, and say, enough is enough. We are not going to war. We don't want a war. There's no reason to go to war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.